Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Soulcast Media live event. It is so fantastic seeing everybody. I was looking at the chat function behind the scenes, and oh my goodness, we have an amazing international audience here today, and what a joy this is. Okay, if everybody can hear me and see me okay, first of all, give me a thumbs up on your end. This is my way of gauging all the tech and audio is working because you never know sometimes with the internet. So if you can hear me, you can see me okay, give me a thumbs up or just type a yes in the chat function just so I know everything is working perfectly. First of all, thank you all for being here, for taking the time out of your day to join us, whether it is your morning, your evening, your afternoon. I'm dialing in from California, so it's around our morning. My guest is dialing in from the UK, so I know it's going to be right before his dinner time, which is why we're so glad and so fortunate for him to join us. But before I invite him up, I just want to give a quick welcome and rundown of what is going to happen today. We are dialing in live right now. So we have a very special event for you. Today, we are going to be talking about creative energy and powerful speaking. Now, I have to say, the fact that you are here, it means that something about this probably calls to you, whether it's the speaking part of it, whether it's the energy part of it, something about this topic, you're like thinking, I'm curious and I want to know more. And I can promise you, this conversation with my guest and I, it is absolutely going to energize you. We're going to be sharing some tips on how you can get those creative energy, those creative juices flowing so you can better show up in the workplace. But not only that, what does this have to do with communications? Because for those of you who don't know who I am, and this is the first time we're meeting, I'll do a quick introduction. My name is Jessica Chen, and I'm the founder and CEO of Soulcast Media, and we are a global communications training company. All the things I talk about, advocating for yourself, public speaking, developing executive presence, all these things has to do with communications. Now, one of the reasons why I talk about this and I've made it my life's work, so to speak, is because for me, communications was not something I was good at growing up. Part of it was because I consider myself fairly shy and fairly introverted. And when I started my first job, which was on TV as a news reporter, as you can imagine, being a good communicator was absolutely critical. So I always joke that I had a crash course in communications when I started working on TV because you got to get good at it. 10 years later, and after winning an Emmy Award, I decided to come out and start Soulcast Media. And now I can say I've taught over 2 million people how to become more confident communicators. So I'm very glad you're here. It is going to be a fantastic event. And by the way, if there's any tech issues during the middle of our chat, you can simply refresh your browser, whether you're on your phone or your computer, and it should take you back to exactly where we are. So, with that, let's get started. We got a lot to talk about today. So, today we're talking about creative energy and powerful speaking. And I'm absolutely thrilled to invite my guest up. His name is Simon Alexander Ong, and I actually consider him a friend. We actually just grabbed lunch together just a few days ago. We can tell you all about it. But Simon is a friend. He's also an amazing author of a book called Energize, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So, with that, let me pull up Alexander and have him introduce himself. So, sorry, Simon, how are you? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm doing fantastic, Jess. And as you said, we only just caught up for lunch the other day when I was in Los Angeles. And while you were speaking, I was just looking through the comments and I see a few Malaysians, people dialing in from Malaysia. I am also a fellow Malaysian, a Malaysian Chinese born here in the UK, and am very excited to talk about this topic of creative energy and powerful speaking and also answering the audience's questions.
Absolutely. We have over 200 folks here right now, Simon. Isn't that amazing? From all over the world. Okay, so I did a quick intro of who you are, the book that you have, your whole, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I feel like you've made it your life's mission to talk about energy and positive energy. So even before we get into that, what got you interested in talking about energy?
Mm, Thank you. So my background is when I graduated from university, I started in the financial services sector at what was probably the worst possible time. It was the middle of 2007, a year before the global financial crisis swept across the planet. And the company that I started with was Lehman Brothers, which collapsed into administration just 14 months after I joined as a graduate. I was in and out of jobs for nearly a decade in the financial services industry before I quit that to start my own business as a coach and a speaker. I just wanted to do coaching when I started the business, but very quickly I had clients of mine saying to me, Simon, we would love to have you come to our company and speak about some of the stuff you work with your clients on. And I took that opportunity with both hands. And before I knew it, speaking became a much bigger part of the work that I get to do. And one of the factors that got me writing about energy in the book Energize was the fact that when I came down from stages, I would have people come up to me, not always with questions, but with the statement that, Simon, I loved your energy on stage. And, if I could only have a small percentage of that, I could go on and accomplish so much more in my life and my career. And so I really wanted to speak to that. How did I get to a point where I was energized in the work that I do, where I could transfer and connect with people as a way of empowering and inspiring them to go ahead and make the progress that they wanted to?
I always find that, we interview a lot of authors here, and I
Mm,
always find whatever it is the authors talk about, whatever it is they write about, it is because A, of course, they find it very interesting, but
mm,
B, it's because there was something about their own life experience that really got them wanting to invest in learning
mm,
about this. So, you shared a very, I feel like, relatable story of, you're going from job to job, not necessarily feeling energized. And you're like,
mm,
wait a second, I need to do something about this. I can't just keep going on. And in fact, I feel like for a lot of the people who are on here right now, maybe you might feel similar, right? We all are working. We're working really
mm,
hard. We're clocking in and day out, and sometimes it can feel a bit draining, right? We
mm.
all feel that from time to time, whether it's because we're so busy or because of the work itself. So, Simon, I have to ask you, for anybody who's here right now, who's like, I don't mind my job, right? Maybe they don't mind doing it, but sometimes they don't have that energy to want to put in their 100%. We kind of
Mm.
hear that from time to time, right? Where it's like, let me just kind of do what I need to do, but nothing more. What's your perspective on this, Simon? And is that okay? Should we change it? What are your thoughts?
So first of all, Jess, when I think about energy, I see it through four dimensions. The first is physical, the second is mental, the third is emotional, and the final one is spiritual. Now, I'll touch on spiritual first because that then leads on to answering your question. So when you are low on spiritual energy, it means you are doing work that is not aligned to your values. You're not in a space or community that allows you to express your full potential. And that manifests itself through the feeling of tension inside of your stomach because it feels like you're going against who you are. When you're high on spiritual energy, you feel in flow because the work that you get to do is something that makes you feel alive and you feel a pull towards making something happen. You're doing work that allows you to fulfill your potential. So often when we look at society around us, it's not that we are exhausted from doing too much physically, but very often it's because we are exhausted because we're doing too little of the things that bring us joy and because we are running someone else's definition of success. Now, let's assume you are not spiritually exhausted, but let's say you're doing work which you don't mind and you're doing work that you enjoy. Now, if you are still feeling exhausted, chances are it's to do with the other three buckets. It's your physical, your mental, or your emotional energy. So when I look at physical energy, it's really about three pillars. It's your sleep, it's your nutrition, and it's your movement. So if you're not getting sufficient rest, if you're not eating well, and you're not regularly moving your body, then of course you're going to have a very low baseline of energy. So when you go to work, you're not going to really feel inspired or energized to want to do more than the bare minimum because you're running on low, you're running on low fuel. It's like starting the 100 meters, 20 meters before the starting line. Whatever happens throughout the day, you're always going to be playing catch up. So that's the physical side. The mental energy really touches on three areas. It's your ability to focus, it's your mindset, and it's your ability to tap into your creative energy. And then emotional energy is how you relate to yourself and others. This is what some people might call emotional intelligence.
So it's interesting because I feel like a lot of what you're saying, people are like, of course, like, conceptually they get it, right? It's like the physical, emotional, and mental, right? And it's like making sure that you have all these things. But what do you tell folks when they're like, I'm just so busy? Right? Because a lot
Mm,
of folks are busy. Like I have kids, I have work, I have like my personal life, like I got things to, I have activities. Like, how can I make sure I'm always bringing 100%? And let me ask, is that even realistic? Because sometimes I feel that energy is like sometimes we can give a lot in one area, but then
mhm,
that depletes another area. And I just think, like, for example, personally speaking, like a few weeks ago we were so crazy busy here at Soulcast Media, and as a result I couldn't devote as much energy as I wanted to my son, to my family. And it wasn't because I didn't want to, it was because I was just so utterly exhausted because there's
mhm.
just so much. So for folks who are like, I just have so much to do, how do you prioritize, or how do you even think about something like this?
Well, I think there's two parts to the question, so I'll answer them in turn. So the first part is this idea of busyness. And it's funny because when I think of this word busyness, what I actually see is the fact that we're not necessarily always busy. The fact is, more often than not, if you reflect on the activities that you do each day, we tend to find ourselves putting more activities into our day in order to distract us from what actually is most important to address. And so we get into this trap of actually craving a busy schedule just to look like we're important. Whereas the reality is we're busy running around in circles, but not really going anywhere. And so the real question is not about how do I get less busy, but it's how do I prioritize better? Because I remember having a conversation with someone who said they're always busy and they don't really get time to watch much television.
Mhm.
And then we got into a conversation with friends, and one of the friends said, "Hey, have you watched this new Netflix show? This is an incredible season. Everybody's talking about it." So this same person that said they had no time because they're so busy with work suddenly found time to watch one episode of that season, and across 3 weekends finished the entire season. Now, this is coming from someone who said they were busy and didn't have time to watch much television. But what that showed me is that if something is important enough to you, you will make time for it. So I think if we default to thinking of life as busy, it can be an easy excuse to avoid facing what is most important for us to prioritize. What's better is to take a step back and ask yourself, what are my most important priorities? And do my schedules and my routines reflect that? So that's the first part of the question. The second part about times where we go through different seasons of our life throughout the year. So there'll be some parts of the year where you might have to dedicate a bit more time to work, which means you'll spend less time with the family. And there'll be some parts of the year where you can spend more time with the family because your calendar isn't so busy. Now, it's just about understanding ahead of time what's going to come up so you can plan around that. So when I was publishing my book, for example, I knew 6 or 9 months ahead of time that those weeks just before and just after publication was going to be intensely busy. So knowing that ahead of time, I would be foolish to say yes to a lot of new work
Mhm.
around those weeks leading up and the weeks after publication. So instead, I declined any new work for 3 months before and 3 months after the book's publication. So that gave me the space and the oxygen to think and respond to all of those inquiries to guest on a podcast or be interviewed for a magazine or television or to do a book promotional event at a local bookstore. It meant I could actually dedicate attention and energy towards those things. And the last part you mentioned, I think it's important to address when you said, can we actually give 100% to everything that we do? The reality is no. And there's days where I can't give 100% either. The key is not about whether you are giving 100% each day to the things that matter most to you. The key question to ask yourself is, am I giving my best each day? That's a far more productive question to ask, because giving your best today when you are a single parent, or when you're looking after an elderly parent, or when you've got three kids or more to deal with, it's going to be very different for each of us.
Mhm.
So the thing to understand is, can you look in the mirror at the end of each day and think, given the constraints I have and the obligations that are currently in my life, have I given my best today? And if the answer is yes, that's what matters. And then you show up again tomorrow Give your best each day. That's all we can ask.
I think for a lot of us, we put so much pressure on ourselves oftentimes where we gotta be the best, do the best, give 100%, that sometimes it can feel very demoralizing when we're like, oh, it wasn't what we expected, right? And I
Yeah.
think the perspective of, you know what, it doesn't have to be 100%. It doesn't have to be A plus plus. I think that kind of goes back to that mentality of you gotta be number one in class, right? It doesn't even have to be like that. It's like, as long as you really did try your best, that's all that matters. I sometimes think, after having my son, I feel like this idea of conscious parenting also
Mm,
is related to kind of how we speak to them too. And
yeah.
it's a reflection of also how we speak to ourselves, right? I feel like because we're conscious of how we speak to maybe like our kids, if we have kids, but sometimes we can be very critical of our own
Mm,
behaviors, our own patterns and things like that, right? So I think what you said was really poignant. By the way, I want to let everybody know right now, you know, as much as this is a conversation between me and Simon, and we're talking all things energy and, how to better show up, we want you to know that this is a conversation with you too.
mm,
Meaning, if you have any thoughts or questions, to put it into the chat function here right now. And I know many of you are actually saying, agreeing and, kind of sharing your points already. So keep that coming, because we're actually seeing this as we're talking too. So I want to pivot really quickly, Simon, to the communications aspect of
mm,
energy, because for many of you, that is what I talk about day in and day out here. And it's funny because, Simon, when I first heard about you and your work, instantly I was like, there is such a thing as communications energy, speaking energy. And many of us don't think too much about it, but we know it. Well, you'll know it when I say it. And so I'll talk about it. And then, Simon, I want to get your perspective on
mm,
this. But speaking energy is, for me, and because of the work that I do, it's the ability to, once you start talking, to command the attention of people
mm,
who are listening.
mm,
Many people who go into a meeting and let's say they have to do a public speaking presentation, because they really don't like it, they start talking in a very monotone voice. They're like, get me the heck out of here. Or they
mm.
start talking really fast, right? But energy is really having that presence when you're speaking. So, Simon, what are your thoughts on communications and energy? How do you do it? Does it go together? What's your thought?
Absolutely. I think communication is one of the most important leadership skills that we can develop. Now, this is whether you are working in a company, whether you are leading a team, whether you are running your own business. Your ability to communicate with others determines the influence you have. Yeah, if you can communicate in a powerful manner, you have that ability to influence every audience that you speak to. Now, communication isn't just public speaking. I think public speaking is one facet of
Mhm.
communication, but communication is also through other mediums. When you write something down or send an email to someone, when you send a voice note to someone, when you record a video, when you market your products and services, it's how we communicate. Even when you do a job interview, you're communicating your story and your value to the person sitting on the other side of the table. And so communication for me is such an important skill for us to master, especially as we progress up the hierarchy of an organization.
It's funny because I remember once I was talking to somebody about communications energy, and somebody was like, does that mean like it's always exclamation marks? Like, hey, I'm here, I'm happy. And it's not about always having exclamation marks in your speaking or in your writing.
Mm,
I feel like energy is, well, in my perspective, the way I think about it is being very intentional, being very present there in the moment,
mm,
right? Giving and showing the other person that you are paying attention to them, because when you don't do that, people feel that as well. They're like, oh, wow, Jessica's not really paying attention to what I'm saying. Then what happens? My energy and my
mm.
enthusiasm then goes down. So just to be clear, it's not that you have to always put exclamation marks behind your sentences. But Simon, what do you think?
Totally. I mean, a quote comes to my mind, Jess, and it's a quote from Maya Angelou. And she said something like, people will forget what you did, people will forget what you said, but they will never forget the way you made them feel. And that ability to touch people through emotion is from communication. The way we communicate is how we ignite certain emotions in the person listening to us. And so, going back to your question about is energy communication all about exclamation marks? Absolutely not. Just to give you an example, one of the orators that I'm a big fan of is Barack Obama. Now, when you see Obama deliver his speeches, you won't see Obama necessarily shout at the audience or have lots of exclamation marks in his delivery. But what he has mastered is two things, and one goes to what you've just said just now, Jess, which is intentionality, and the second is the power of the pause. The power of the pause to connect, but allow the audience to reflect. So if I give you a very short example, he may say something like this, which includes pause and intentionality. Today, we sit here at the precipice of a change in society. You, me, those closest to you have the power to step up, have the power to change our future, have the power to decide our tomorrow. Now, notice there was no exclamation marks or loud shouting in what I just delivered, but it was intentional and it had the power to pause in there. So it means that you're waiting to hear what the next word is, and you're waiting to hear how is this story going to evolve. So that's an example of energy not necessarily being all about the loudest and the exclamation marks.
I love that, and it reminds me because I'm also writing a book right now, and of course, it's a communications book, and we're still working on the title. I mean, we kinda have it, but we're gonna announce it soon, but it's
Hmm,
really teaching folks how you do not have to be loud in order to be
hmm,
heard, right? And I really have found that, you know, a huge part of being able to communicate effectively is
hmm.
trusting that you actually know what you're saying, right? You know,
Yeah.
when we think about communications energy, we also have to think about the confidence that we feel.
Hmm,
You know, I think for many of us, sometimes we can doubt ourselves and be like, well, I'm not 100% sure, or I feel like other people might know more than me.
hmm.
When we go in with that mentality, what happens? We almost mute ourselves
Yeah.
and we hinder the power of our communication. So I always say that, you know, especially for the people who are particularly hard on themselves, who put a lot of pressure on wanting and needing to be perfect, you know, you just got to trust that most of the times you know what you're talking about. And even though other people know and might know the material, you absolutely offer some perspective, something that you can add to it that is unique and
Hmm.
different. And that's the thing. You gotta own it. You gotta own it.
Exactly. And that's why I think a lot of public speaking and communication is about mindset. There's a statement that I share in the book that I often share to those who want to improve their lives through any area. And it's this: there are always two sales that occur. The second is selling you to others, the first is selling you to you. And until you can sell you to you, it is always going to remain a challenge to sell you to others. So that's an important part when it comes to speaking. If you believe you have value to offer, if you believe that what you have to say is going to impact someone's life positively, then the audience is going to believe it. But how can they ever believe that if you yourself don't even believe it? So I think that mindset shift is fundamental to influencing the energy that we bring to a stage and that we transfer to the audience.
You know, I hope everybody who is listening right now, and, you know, we're about like 30 minutes into it, so we're already halfway through, which, you know, I hope everybody who's listening, you know, whether you're walking or outside or driving or at home and your computer in the office, that everything that Simon and I are talking about are things that are absolutely doable. You know,
Hmm,
nothing that we're saying is something that you have to go out and, you know, buy something to do, you know, and it's just literally being able to sit at home and just reflect on, okay, everything that we're talking about today, this creative energy, this powerful speaking,
hmm,
it is actually, and it might just go back to that word of being intentional. You know, we have a question right now that I want to get to because I think it covers the essence of what we're talking about. And this is
hmm,
actually from an Antonio. You know, how do you cope with the days in which you are running low on energy?
hmm,
And I'm sure a lot of us have felt this way, where maybe it's the beginning of the day, or maybe it's the end of the day where we're just like,
hmm.
I'm just so tired. When somebody says that, I mean, how do you react to this, Simon? What do you normally think?
Sure. Well, first of all, this is exactly why I say to people, energy management, not time management, is the key to productivity. So we are human, which means it is impossible to always remain at a 100% level of energy. So what it means is that when we do feel low in energy, if it's physical, mental, emotional, the key is to listen to your body. Your body is always speaking to you. The question is, are you listening to it? Or are you suppressing that voice? If you are suppressing it, that is going to come back to bite you later on in the form of burnout, in the form of exhaustion, in the form of feeling absolutely drained. So when you start to feel you're feeling a little low in energy, you want to do things that will reset and recharge you. So it could be as simple as Tara just said in comments there, getting outside in nature, disconnecting, going for a walk, uh, moving your body, getting some sun, reading a book, doing something that allows you to disconnect and recharge, having a nap, doing something that will recharge your battery. Because when you then come back to your desk, when you come back to your screens, you're going to be in a far better and healthier state if you have done those activities. So the key is listening to your body and addressing it so that you can manage and be sustainable in the effort that you deliver in your job or in your workplace.
I want to ask everybody here right now who is listening, what do you do to re-energize yourself? That's actually a question that I want you to think about, and actually let us know in the chat function that you have available right now. Open it and just type in what's one thing that you do that always gets you energized. And I'm very curious to hear what everybody has to say. I mean, we're already seeing it. It was that nature. I
Mm.
feel like some people might say, maybe a cup of coffee or maybe reading something, writing. I'll tell you, for me, a really good thing that energizes me, especially if I'm feeling boggled down, and let me tell you, it is so hard to do, is
Mhm.
actually I've been journaling for many years now, but I call it my journaling chair, but I will take my journal and I'll force myself to just sit there for even just 5 minutes to
Mm.
reflect on all the good things that
Mm.
has happened. Because I think oftentimes when we are feeling stressed, we think of just the negative. We think of like, oh, this sucks. This is so much. Like we think so much like negativity, that negative energy, right? So when for me, I'll take my journal and I'll sit down and I'll just like reflect on all the good things, because I've also found that many times when I feel low energy, it's because I have not prioritized very
Mm.
well either, like you mentioned earlier. So we're seeing a lot of the comments come in of, oh my gosh, there's like, I love the
I'm loving all
variety.
the comments here because it speaks to a lot of the things I do. And just while we're looking at the comments, another thing I'll throw in there is, first of all, Jess, I love that you journal and you write your thoughts down on paper, because as a friend, Diana Chow, said to me once, she said, writing is humanity distilled into ink, because the process of writing allows us to better understand ourselves. And I believe that you cannot have self-development without self-awareness, because you simply can't change what you're not aware of. And so writing your thoughts down onto paper allows you to better understand what's going on in here and to get clarity as to the best steps forward. And the one exercise, if you do happen to be feeling emotionally exhausted, maybe you're going through a tough time at work, or you've just come out of a breakup in your personal life, or you've gone through a tragedy in your personal life, this one exercise is a bit of a sneak peek because it's an exercise I share in the book. But this one exercise has been proven to elevate your energy almost instantly, especially if you're going through a tough time. And it's 3 steps. The first step is to write down. So you might want to do this now if you have a notepad and pen with you. So the first step is to write down the name of the first person that comes to your mind that you can be most grateful for when you think about where you are in life today. Step 2 is to write down why in as much detail as possible. The more detailed, the better, because you'll see why in a minute. In step 3, what you want to do is to pick up the phone, not now, but after this call, pick up the phone, call that person, and read out word for word what you wrote down. Now, if hearing step 3 has made you feel a little nervous already, then at a minimum, what you want to do instead is to send them a voice note. Because the thing with this is that your voice carries energy. If you send a text message or an email, the recipient has to make up the emotional state you are in how you delivered that message. But if you record a voice note or you call a person and you tell them through your voice carries emotion and energy, and they can feel it.
I will agree to that because when Simon and I first, connected, you sent me a voice note, and I felt like that was so unusual, to tell you the truth. You know, because initially we connected on LinkedIn, actually,
Mm,
and I think I said, "Hey, you know, love your work, we should connect." I think I said might have said something like that, and then you
yeah.
responded with a voice note, and I don't know if it's maybe in the US, we don't use that function as
Mm,
much as I feel like other people do, but I will tell you, just even, yeah, hearing your voice, it humanizes you that I
mm,
feel like, written communications sometimes cannot. By
mm.
the way, I just want to highlight what some of you are saying. You know, when you are all writing, like, what gives you energy, you know, I love specifically the one that said being around positive people.
So you must
Absolutely.
all be feeling energized right now, huh?
I hope you all are feeling energized because, you know, Simon and I are trying to be as positive as we can because we want to let you know that this event is really for you to kind of get you thinking about, you know, how is it that you are currently feeling right now in the workplace? And then also giving you some strategies and some
Mm,
tools for, you know, going ahead, you know, whether it's like you still have the whole day ahead of you or, you know, the next few days of this week. Okay. So, Simon, I want to ask you a more pointed question, and that is, okay, so if people really just wanted to have do one or two simple, quick things to just get them refocused,
mm,
re-energized, like kind of like, you know, reset a little bit. What's kind of like the one or two things that they should always remember? And I want to say this in a way where it's something that people can do easily. They can just write it down and just always remind themselves like, "Hey, practice doing this thing because it can really help with elevating my energy."
mm. So I will start with the basics. So physical energy for me gives you a baseline foundation. So first of all is to make sleep a priority. Make a sleep a priority because it is the foundation of your most productive days. Second is make sure, and it doesn't have to be going to the gym or doing anything intense, but just make sure you're moving your body on a regular basis. And the third is make sure the food you're eating is stuff that is going to give you energy, not drain you. Otherwise, you're going to have an afternoon slump every single day. Uh, in terms of other tips I would say is make sure you plan your day the night before. Now,
Mhm.
here's why this tip is very important. It serves two purposes. One, when you plan your day the night before, your quality of sleep is a lot better because you go to bed with a fresh mind, a clear mind, than one full of thoughts about the next day. Also, when you wake up, you know exactly what to focus on when your day starts, rather than waste those precious hours at the beginning of the day when your energy is at its highest, thinking about what you want to do today. And by the time you start, you've lost all of those hours where your energy is at its highest. So that for me is one of the first things I would address. But even higher at a macro level is I would say start being committed with your intentions. Now, this is a very easy step. A lot of us will say, tonight I'm going to bed at 10. But how many of us actually follow through with what we told ourselves we were going to do? Or they might say, first thing tomorrow morning, I'm going to send this email and call this person, and I'm going to tick that off. Again, how many of us actually follow through with that? So, at a really macro level, it's just starting to follow through with the things you told yourself you were going to do, not what other people are telling you, but just the things you told yourself you're going to do. And that will give you that feeling of momentum. And when you have that feeling of momentum, you're going to feel energized. You're going to feel like, what else is possible?
I Okay, so you're saying movement, you also said diet, and then you also said being able to plan your day. And actually, I wanted to talk about the diet part, and we're not like a health, you know, podcast or anything like that, but it's so true. So I was in Singapore a few weeks ago, and then when
Mm,
I got back to the States, I was terribly jet lagged. And when I was jet lagged, it meant that I wasn't eating as much because I just wasn't hungry. I was just kind of
yeah.
tired and just kind of going about my day. But one of the benefits of that was I'm a huge sweets person. I love sweets, but when I came back, I had zero cravings for sugar, for dessert,
Mm,
and what I found was my energy level tremendously. My
mm,
energy level, my focus, it felt
mm,
so sharp. And I'm
yeah.
sure there's tons of studies on this because we know sugar is probably not the best for you,
Mm,
but it was perfect because when I came back from Singapore, I started editing my book. So
Mm,
I
mm,
had to focus. And I was just telling my husband how, like, wow, because normally after dinner, I'll be like in the cupboard trying to maybe get a piece of chocolate or, get a scoop of ice cream. But I had no cravings for it. And
mm.
instead, I just kind of after dinner, once I put my son to sleep, I just started working. And then I was like, wow, like all my thoughts are so clear. So I don't know if we have if any of you are like huge sweet tooth fans, or if you're just like, oh yeah, I don't eat sugar. But I
Mm.
don't know, Simon, I mean, have you
Yeah.
experienced something like that?
I mean, the key thing with this is that I'm not saying you should be perfect with your diet all the time. There's no such thing as perfection, and you will also not enjoy living. For me, it's to make sure the majority of your diet is healthy. Now, of course, you can then have times where you treat yourself, you can have a bit of ice cream, a bit of chocolate, but the key is most of your weekly meals, that the meals you have every day, your snacks, are healthy. Because then what's going to happen, just as you experienced, Jazz, is you're going to think clearer. You're going to have more energy. You're going to show up more different. And just in terms of tips, I know we're kind of shortish on time, Jess, but just in terms of tips, I saw one or two questions about public speaking and creativity. So I just want to share two quick tips that addresses the question I saw on public speaking, and then one on creative energy.
Yeah.
So on public speaking, I just have this one tip for you, which is how to begin and end a presentation. Now, most people, when they start a presentation, whether that's to an audience, whether that's to internal colleagues, we tend to start in the same way, which is, hey, I'm X, and I'm going to talk to you about this, this, and this, and let's get started, and we jump to the slides. Now, that is what most people on this planet experience, and in fact, there's a term for it, which we call death by PowerPoint. It's a disease that so many of us suffer every single day. But here's a tip for you. Next time you deliver a presentation or you speak publicly, think of beginning your presentation like a James Bond movie opening. So if you've ever watched a James Bond film, you'll know that at the beginning of the film, it drops you in the action, and then you might be in a chase scene, or there might be this big stunt across this beautiful landscape where James Bond would dive off a train track, or he'll dive off a mountain. And then the theme tune kicks off, and then the movie backtracks to pick up where it left off. So imagine if you could do the equivalent of delivering your opening like a James Bond film. So instead of me saying, hey, I'm Simon Alexander Ong, and today I'm going to talk about this topic to you, I'm going to cover these 3 points. I might start by saying something like, in 1943, chief engineer of a company called Lockheed Martin, Clarence Johnson, picked up the phone, a call delivered by the Pentagon in the United States, a call that would forever change the history of mankind, and a call that would change his future in that company. So what's happening here is I'm drawing you into my story. I'm dropping you in the action, and then later I'm going to pull you back to tell you why that was relevant. Why did I share that story? And then to finish with what I call a crescendo. So in a crescendo in music is where the music kicks up, where it goes up a beat, and it gets you excited and energized. So a crescendo in speaking could be something like a powerful story to leave them with. It could be a question, or it could be a quote. So for example, I might say to you as a finisher, we have won the greatest lottery ticket there is going, the lottery of life. And the question for you is this: what are you going to do with that winning ticket in your hand? The ticket that we are all holding. So then that gets the audience to reflect. It's a crescendo that means when they walk out of the auditorium, they're in reflective mode. And the last thing I want to touch on, which is touching on someone's question on creative energy, is how do we get more creative? Well, simply diversify your inputs. Have diversity of inputs in terms of the people you spend time with, in terms of the books you read, in terms of what you watch and what you learn, because that allows you to connect and communicate with audience in such original ways that make you stand out. A term that I call UTP, unique talking points. People can't help but talk about your delivery because it was done in such a unique way. A quick example is Bill Gates at his TED Talk when he spoke about the work that his foundation was doing to combat malaria. Around 18 to 20 minutes through his presentation, he turned over a glass jar on the table standing next to him on stage. There was a swarm of mosquitoes in that jar that suddenly flew into the audience. Now, if you weren't listening, You sure as hell were listening now. You were on the edge of your seat. Bill reassured the audience by saying, don't worry, none of these mosquitoes carry malaria, but I just wanted you to feel what it was like for people living in countries where every bite they get could contain malaria. That unique talking point, that original idea, made that speech the most talked about at the TED conference.
I want to also highlight how, so first of all, you mentioned the public speaking tips,
Mm,
starting with the story, and then that creative energy, which is, being mindful of your inputs, like what's coming into you and what's taking your energy, what's sucking your energy out, and how can you protect that in some ways. I actually want to give one quick, and by the way, we're about to wrap up here, which is so crazy because I feel like we've been talking, this has been so much fun. And I know it's getting dark where you're at, Simon. So let me do a quick tip for public speaking and presentations and communication. So you said story, Simon.
mm,
For me, I feel that if starting out with a story feels kind of funny to you,
mm,
sometimes just telling folks, this is what you're going to get out of this. This is what I hope you're going to walk away with. My hope is at the end of this presentation, everybody is going to feel like they know exactly what to do with A,
mm,
B, and C. Just being so crystal clear and being explicit can let people know, okay, the next 20 minutes, I'm interested.
mm,
So I think that's a great communications tip. And
yeah,
then one for creative energy. When I think about creative energy, I think I have to say it's the same where we all know when we're starting to feel tired. Listen to that and don't try to keep pushing forward because ultimately, if you keep trying to push forward, your output, your quality of work is not
mm,
going to be as sharp as it can be. So if you feel like you are starting to get tired, your eyes are
mm.
starting to droop, take a break, go out. All of you said some amazing things of what energized you. I think one of you said looking at my dog, which I love, So just keep that in mind and just give yourself the luxury of giving yourself a break because we cannot talk about energy if we don't talk about giving ourselves a break. Okay, Simon, I want to say thank you so, so, so much. Okay, for those of you who don't know you or who don't follow you yet, where can they get connected with you?
Sure. So I'm on all the major social media platforms, but the two that I use the most are LinkedIn. So you can search Simon Alexander Ong and you will find my profile there, and Instagram at Simon Alexander O. And if you are interested to have a read of Energize, you can find it on Amazon. Just type Energize by Simon Alexander Ong and you will see it up there.
Highly, highly recommend his book. I have a copy here myself because yes, he talks about all the things that we've been talking about today. So if you want more of it, be sure to check out his book. So with that, I just want to say thank you all for spending the time with us today. I hope this conversation re-energized you in a sense where, maybe energy was never an issue. But if not, then this was maybe a way to elevate how you go about
Mm,
working and living. And hopefully you all feel that positivity that, Simon and I have been talking about. So if this is the first time you are joining one of my lives, I want to say I hope you enjoyed it. I host these actually every other week. So I have another amazing guest coming on in about 2 weeks. She's the chief marketing officer of Sprinkles Cupcakes. If any of you knows about Sprinkles Cupcakes, yes, we're going to be talking about marketing specifically as well. So if you want to join us there, you can go to our website, soulcastmedia.com, and we're going to get the conversation going because, again, I host these to help you think about your career and think about communications a little bit more strategically. So if you and I are also not connected yet, be sure to add me on LinkedIn. That's the platform I'm most on, but I'm also on Instagram as well. You can find me, Jessica Chen page. So with that, Simon, I appreciate you so much. I know it's nighttime. You're about to run to dinner. So we will stay connected and thank you all for taking the time. Talk to y'all soon.